the images, it was pretty hard to tell what the heck we were looking at. Sure enough, there's even a little opening still left there. I'll be darned. I'll be darned. Really collapsed back here. Okay, I think we're on to our next location. Coming up here to another section of the Sparta ditch. This one's about 3/4 of a mile from the first section we crossed. Wasn't a huge ditch, but it did its job. It didn't last all that long for mining purposes. They might have got 10, 15 years out of it, for the majority of the mining. But in all honesty, I think probably the first 3 years were the most productive after they finished it. And then it kind of tapered off after that. But it's still pretty amazing. One of these days I'll do a video explaining more about this ditch and its history. Looks like we may have another prospect cut down here. Nope. Just a place to hold water. This is something you'd see quite often up in this country. I don't know if this is one of them, but they used to, this ditch, it was feeding so many different mines around, and certain times of year, from what my understanding is, it would get a little low on water. So what the old timers would do is they would build these dams, and they'd get a little bit of water from the ditch, let the water build up, for hours or a day, because they would just be getting a little trickle out of their share. And then they would open it up and start mining down below with what water they had backed up in these little reservoirs. A lot of these little ponds that you see up in these areas, those were built by the old timers. Not all of them. A lot of them were built for irrigation for cows as well, cattle, so they had some water. But quite a number of them were built from the old timers, especially before they built the ditch. They would try and catch a little bit of that spring runoff so they could work an extra week or two at their mine or their claim and, have a water for just a little bit longer. Just walking out of here, and here is another prospect pit. Anyway, they would build those things all over the place. You look on LiDAR, you'll see those things up all kinds of draws. And then after they got the ditch done, like I was explaining, they may not have had enough water in the ditch, or their share, especially at the times when they had a lot of people on this ditch, had a lot of shares sold for the ditch. So their share may be just a little trickle of water at times. So they would build those ponds to hold the water back. So they'd get enough water built up. They could sluice for a little bit. If they had a giant down below them, they could, run that thing for an hour or two and get a little more gold. So if you look on LiDAR and you see all those little ponds built up every little draw up in here, a lot of them were the miners. Now, that mine we were just at with the underground workings, I saw no evidence that there was ever a mill set up at that site. I don't think if they did mill anything, they hauled it somewhere else to get it done. And I'm kind of questioning whether, besides maybe hand milling, they really processed any ore out of that. Believe it or not, turn that a little bit that way. Believe it or not, a lot of these, what we look at today is, and that must have taken a lot of work. They must have found something there. A lot of times they didn't. They had no way to core drill. And even when core drilling came along, it would have been out of the reach of most small miners. So the way they would explore they would just sink a little tunnel in or an adit, maybe a little shaft, and see what's down there, see if it's worth exploring it more. Now that one, it had a number of them, so they must have got a little something out of there, but being that they had no crushing operation, no milling operation, I don't think they found much there. So you'll see a lot of these old mines, especially these ones where it's just a one single adit out there and no milling. They were most likely just essentially prospecting, hard prospecting, but prospecting. Okay, so found a good parking spot up on the hillside there off the road. I think the second location we're looking for is somewhere off this way, so let's go see if we can find it. I'm kind of thinking I had this particular site marked on the other mapping program, and I think what I'm walking down to here is just the end of a placer operation. I think the hard rock mine's up above us a little ways. I'm not sure exactly why I marked this spot. As I'm walking down in here, I vaguely remember looking and saying, oh yeah, that, the placer operation stopped there. And I think there's a ditch line down here. And that's the reason the placer operation stopped. It happened a lot. You get up in here, yeah, I can tell this is all plastered out down below us here. They probably used hydraulic giant and come up through here. But the ditch is right here below me. So there was probably some pretty decent gold that they were finding in here in this draw. And as soon as they hit the ditch line and they didn't have the gravity feed anymore, that's where the operation stopped. So a lot of times in areas where they did dig ditches to get the water, if you can get above where the old timers worked, where the ditch line was, you can find pretty good gold. The problem is you don't have any water. Our old mining claim, it's not too awful far from here. We ran into the same thing. The old timers pretty much quit where the ditch stopped. They went up as far as they could where they had water, and then they stopped. And then 10, 15 years later, they put the old documentation calls it a hydraulic elevator, but they essentially brought water down from one hillside across a low spot and got it further up on the hillside on the other side, and were able to work a little further up. They gained another maybe 100 feet in elevation and worked some of that. And the gold we were finding was spots that the old timers had missed. And if they were finding gold like we found where they had those spots they missed, they must have done really well. I'm just going to go down here and take a quick peek at where these guys stopped mining. Right in here, there used to be a dam right here, you can tell. And this is pretty much where their mining operation stopped. In these days, it's pretty hard to tell with all the vegetation that's down in these draws, and the cuts have slumped in now. But you look on LiDAR, you can easily tell where there had been operations compared to the draws that didn't have mining operations in them. It's clearly visible. So the ditch line is just right over there. So they probably dammed this up maybe before the ditch, who knows, to try and store a little water so they could work down below. Now, earlier we talked about the old Sparta ditch. This was not the main ditch. This was a side ditch they dug off of it back where the old ditch ended, which was several miles that way. They dug this little side tributary. That's what I'm talking about. The main ditch was 32 miles long, but all these little side ditches, there's got to be I don't know, maybe even 30, 40 miles of these little side ditches like this one. But they dug this little ditch over here. And if we look down this draw, down below us here, it's kind of hard to see, but that's all been worked. It worked right up to here. It worked down in there. There's another dam they built down there. We'll go down here and take a little closer look. That's actually about a 10-foot deep hole right there. So a lot of times with these, they would come up here, and where the gold, they would be following the gold, and sometimes it would leave the bottom of the draws. And like this, they worked up here, right up this little part, and then they may have ran out of water, ran out of, there's not enough pressure to operate. So then they start poking these holes up through here. And I expect the other spot we're looking for is going to be up in the timber there. They were looking for where the gold came from. They're just digging potholes, trying to find the source of the gold. So I expect if we walk up that way, we'll find a bunch more of these holes that they dug. This is very, very common up in this particular area. The claim we used to have was exactly like this, where it left the creek bottom and they didn't have water to run hydraulics. They just started digging these holes and following the gold up. And that's kind of what we did. We kind of dug in between their pockets, the holes that they dug, and would find gold. Now, some of these they dug, they didn't find anything. We found that out, the claim we were on, we dug down and got into the material they were in, and there was a reason they just dug one hole and left it. They didn't find anything. So this particular area, the gold is, the distribution is like that. It'll come up, it'll be concentrated in these draws like this, but then once it gets to a point, it will break off from the draw and go up on a hillside is where the gold came from. Usually it's a series of, from what my findings have been, maybe not one vein of gold, but several or even a dozen or more little quartz veins on a hillside, a swarm up on the hillside. And the gold that's where it was liberated from, and it worked its way down into the draws. So this looks to me like the same exact scenario of the claim we used to work. You got these potholes scattered up through here where they're trying to find where the gold came from after it left the bottom of these draws. So you can tell this is pretty deep cut right here. This is 12 feet or so deep that they worked up through here. And I would imagine right in here is where they, we're right only a few feet below the ditch line. So this is where they stopped with the hydraulic mining, and then just had to start looking for where it came from because they didn't have any method to easily bring the material down the hillside to wash it. We found a few spots they did do that, but it was pretty short-lived because they had to move all the overburden by hand, because here with hydraulic mining, they would just wash the overburden away and then get to the good stuff and wash it through the sluice. But if they have to move all that overburden by hand and then haul the material down to water, it just wasn't worth it. Very, very clearly one of the dams they built to hold back water to continue their operation. So I don't exactly remember the LiDAR image, but what I do kind of vaguely remember is this draw comes up here and it comes to this point and then it forks. This fork to the right has been mined along with this little ridge that goes in between the two forks. This fork on the right's not very deep, but they mined right up here and they mined the bottom of that little draw over there, and then they just stopped. Main reason was they reached the point that they had water and they just stopped because the ditch is right there. So I presume this side over here probably didn't have any gold. This very much reminds me of the claim we were on, because the one side that they originally were following, they got up at a little ways and decided that's not where the gold was coming from. It's not very good. Then they worked the other branch and worked up in there. until they ran out of water. And this looks like the exact same scenario here. Well, let's go look for where I think they tried to find the hard rock where this was coming from. I don't know if they found anything, but I'm pretty sure we're going to find a little bit of workings up there. Okay, I'm up above the ditch a little ways, and sure enough, there's potholes all over the place. There's one there. There's one right there. Another one right there. There's about 3 or 4 more over there. So they were trying to trace up this draw where the heck the gold was coming from. I'm way up on the ridge line above that placer workings, and I'm finding spots like this where they were digging in, looking for a vein. There's a little bit of quartz here and there, but not much. Just for reference, these are about 8 to 10 foot deep. Hard to tell how deep they were before they slumped in. And if I remember right, over on the next ridge there's some more working, so we'll go over there next. Okay, so I think I was 2 or 3 ridges off from where this actually was. And, I'm going off of memory because Onyx didn't work. So I think I finally found it. Not sure what this is. We're going to snoop around here. And I think there's something down below as well. See if they ever found the vein. A spot where the placer operation was is down there half, 3/4 of a mile, but boy, did I take a roundabout way to get up here. I completely went up the wrong ridge. So that out there looks like a waste rock pile. These just look like test pits. So I believe, of course, the camera makes everything look flat. This goes down at an angle. I think this was an incline. May have just been a straight up shaft, but I'm pretty sure this was an incline. Trying to look around and see if I can spot any semblance of a vein structure on the sides. I'm going to do some digging here and report back. I scratched the banks over there with a little pick, trying to find a vein. Didn't find anything. Looked on the other side over here. Really didn't find anything. I've only found a couple rocks up here that looked very promising at all. And this is one of them. It's a piece of quartz that I broke open. It's got a little bit of mineralization here and there. There's one that looked better than the rest. I'm going to take it back and crush it up, see if there's anything in it. I'll keep looking around, see if I can find some more, but that's really the biggest piece I've found. I just found a couple little chips here and there. The waste rock doesn't seem to have anything on it. So they must have been pretty thorough about cleaning up everything that they thought might be of value, because they don't have a high-grade pile around here that I can find. So in bag B7 it goes. So as I'm coming down off the hillside, I'm finding these little test holes they did all up through here. There's one every 30, 40 feet. They dug a new hole. You can see them down through there. So evidently they were, I think they would probably take a sample pan and say, yeah, there's still a little gold here, and then come on up. And evidently at the time there was a bunch of float on this hillside that they were probably following up. It's so covered in pine needles right now that it's really hard to see any float without kicking stuff around. I did find a little bit more up around the tailing pile. I kicked some needles out of the way and found enough to give me about a 15-pound sample. So This one down here looks like they got a little more serious on. Pretty decent hole they dug there. My experience up in here is there's multiple veins, usually parallel to each other, and separated by a couple 100 feet. And each one has a little bit of gold in them, but not enough to, you wouldn't want to try and mine it for the most part. I think the only vein that's an exception to that is over at the gem mine. I think they had one vein that was pretty good there that they were following. But most of these up here, it's a bunch of smaller veins, like under a foot wide, and there's multiple ones. And I'm just looking here at their dump pile here, and I see quartz all over in this one. So if they were finding quartz here and up the hillside there about 200-300 feet, that makes sense. If there was a vein up there and a vein down here, probably neither one was all that significant on its own, but you get the material out of 2 or 3 of these, and in the draws, it makes pretty decent gold for placer gold, but not very productive for hard rock. So that one actually had quite a bit of, I guess, their keep pile off to the side here. Lots of quartz. A lot of it doesn't look great. It just looks like bold quartz, but some of it's mineralized, so I picked up another 10 pounds or 15 pounds there, so it went in bag B7. Coming up here is what I originally spotted on the LiDAR. And what's funny about this is it's right next to the road that goes in here. And I've driven this road hundreds of times. And I don't know if I'm just thick-headed or what, but I never noticed this adit that they dug in right here. Obviously collapsed now. Sometimes right up here at the top you can grab a sneak peek down in there, but not this one. And I don't think it goes in very far. The waste rock down here pile doesn't amount to much. Unless, of course, they used it for the road, and they did that a lot. When they built these roads, if there was a nice pile of rock that they could use as roadbed material, they would do it. So sometimes it's kind of hard to know how much waste rock there really was. But they spent some time digging that one. All this on the ground around the bag is quartz. And so that working is about 300 feet from that last one I grabbed a sample from. And then the working on top of the hill is probably another 300-400 feet up. So like I said, there's multiple veins, it looks like, in here, just like so many of these up in here. But actually, this looks pretty decent. Really mineralized. I may grab another bag, drive over here with the rig and grab another bag and take a sample of this stuff as well. Okay, we're going to use B5 down here on this lower adit and take a 20-pound sample or so. Okay, I think I got a short hike into this one. This was the last one today that I know nothing about. I think I'm going to go visit one more after this one, but that one's got a little bit of history on it. I haven't been there in a long time, so that'd be a good time to stop by there since I'm in that general area. This one here intrigues me because on the LiDAR, it looked like there was a pretty good sized waste rock pile. And this hillside's fairly steep, so if that's really that big of a waste rock pile, it probably had some fair amount of workings to it. If I can find it in this tangled up mess. Boy, we should be getting close. This might be it right here. I don't think there's any way this one's going to be open. Neat. Well, for a couple of, that was probably the original portal in the timbers there. Obviously completely collapsed in. And if I remember right, on the LiDAR, up the hill there's a dimple in the ground. So I'm betting it caved in back there, about 40, 50 feet back in there. We'll go up and look in a minute, but quite a cut there. Swing around here. So here is that sumped in spot. Portal down there, about 40, 50 feet up here is a pretty good sized hole where this is sank in. If this was something you were wanting to reopen, I think you'd have to bring a big excavator in here and dig from that back there and turn that into a high wall and dig this all out to gain access to whatever's in there, be my guess. Now, I have done one time on an incline shaft. It didn't have much of an incline, about 30 degree, but my nephew and I, we dug a hole straight down, followed where the cave spot. It was similar to this, not quite as big as this one, but we just followed it down, and we finally got down to where you could get and see down in that, the old workings. But, you know, we were young and dumb. It was extremely dangerous. We didn't have any shoring on it, just a hole that we dug straight down. I don't know how far down we went, 20 feet or so. This, I think, goes straight in the hillside, the adit. So you'd probably only need to dig down, looking at it, 15, 20 feet maybe, and you would be down in the old workings. But again, pretty dangerous prospect. Steep hillside too. So this is the waste rock pile. It's considerably larger than anything else that we've looked at today. This has to have at least 500 to 600 feet of workings in it. Another old mine with the size of the trees that are on the waste rock pile. This one's actually got a little bit for artifacts. Yeah, this one This one goes in a little ways. I may spend a little time around. It smells sulfur. Yeah, this is a pretty good sized waste rock pile. Can't believe I didn't know this was here, but there's no roads going to it, so as a kid, I don't know if I would have ventured in here on my motorcycle. It's quite a ways away from where I was supposed to be. Boy, it smells like there's water leaching out under the ground with sulfur in it. I don't see it popping up out of the ground anywhere. A lot of times, these mines, the water will sump out through the topsoil and pop up down below somewhere, but I don't see any big green spots. Well, the one thing I did forget is my metal detector, which I wanted to bring down here and metal detect this dump. So I'm going to walk back and grab that. So I've been down here doing a little metal detecting. Nothing spectacular. Lots of these like 20 penny round nails. So this mine's most definitely probably after 1900, or at least the last time anybody did anything with this mine. So it's still interesting. I have no idea what the name of this mine is. And the further I look at this tailings, or not tailings, but the waste rock pile, this thing probably has 800 feet or more of workings. This is a pretty good size waste rock pile. And there's piles off to the side as well. These ones over here, are pretty decent sized as well. So, this thing had some pretty decent underground workings. It surprises me I can't find any documentation on this mine. I've looked on all the old records that I can find. Really can't find anything about this thing. So I'm going to wander around up here. And yeah, those are four-sided nuts, so fairly old. But I'm going to wander around up here and see if I can find maybe where there was a cabin or something. I'm wondering, if they did this amount of work, they must have found something somewhat decent. So where did they process the ore at? Where did the ore go? So I'm going to look around here and see if we can figure out what the heck they were doing. Okay, so I've wandered around about 200 yards in every direction looking for where a cabin or a bunkhouse was, maybe a little mill. There's nothing around this thing. Back down here at the bottom of the waste rock pile. And this is where I would expect, since they weren't milling on site, there to be a little road that's cut in here, and they would have a gantry coming out that they could dump the ore into a wagon or a truck, whatever they were using, and haul it to wherever it was getting milled at. I can't find a road coming into this thing. There's maybe a little remnant of a road from where I parked, but it looks more like just a wide game trail. I cannot figure out what they were doing with the ore here, unless they were just putting it in bags and hauling it out little by little. I'm going to keep searching. Okay, I've made a pretty good loop around this mine looking for a place where a building might have been, bunkhouse, mill, anything. Road, nothing. Can't find anything around this mine. Now the hillside over here where the mine is fairly steep, but right below the mine it levels off quite a bit. And there could have been an old road that came into the bottom of this waste rock pile, fairly easy, and it could have disappeared over the years. I don't know. But there's really no sign of it. If, usually you'll see a little sign of a road, but I can't find anything. It really surprises me I can't find a little leveled off spot that a cabin or bunkhouse sat on. There is nothing around this thing. And I was hoping to find one of those little leveled off spots to maybe find some old timbers and things just to give us an idea of the age of this mine. Then I thought, well, maybe a fire come through and destroyed that. But these old trees, you know, they're probably 150, 200-year-old trees, these bigger ones around me. They show no sign of fire scar on them. So I don't think a fire come through and burn everything up. Could have, but there's no sign on the trees. So this one is going to be a little bit of a mystery. I spent several hours looking for information about this mine because I figured from the LiDAR images that it was decent sized and there had to be something. I haven't been able to find it yet. I'm sure it's out there. I just need to figure out. I'd like to know the name of this thing, but I'm going to fill you guys in on this one, where approximately it's at. And maybe you guys can fill me in on some info on this thing. So we're up in the Sparta area. Sparta Butte is to the east of me. Now, before anybody says anything, this is not the old Union mine, unless the Union mine's completely labeled wrong on maps, because this mine is not on any map that I've ever seen. The Union mine's that way, and I was going to visit that mine today, but I'm getting too tired, and I think after I'm done here, I'm going to pick up a few rocks and throw in a bag and take back with me. But after I'm done, I think I'm going to run down to Richland, Oregon, and pick up a soda pop and then head back. It's been my treat for the day. But this mine is almost due west of the old Union mine. And so if any of you guys have any information about this old mine, I'd love to hear it. Name, maybe you know somebody that knew somebody that was up here mining way back when. I don't know. I'm looking for information. This one's kind of baffled me. The other ones, those little prospects that we did earlier today, you know, I don't expect to find much on those because they were just essentially prospects. But this thing, it had enough workings that there should be something documented somewhere. It would help if I had a name for it. That would really speed up the process of finding old newspaper articles and things like that. But so far, I have no idea what the name of this mine is. So, like I said, it's not on any map. I didn't have any idea this thing was here till I just happened to catch my eye when I was looking at LiDAR images. So, if you guys know anything about this, let me know in the comments below. Okay, I'm going to go around here and pick up a few rocks that look like they might be decent. The other thing that I could not find around here, and I was really hoping for it, is a pile, a high-grade pile, or a pile that they meant to haul out for processing. Can't find one. So we're just going to go along the waste rock here and pick up some quartz that I can find here and there and throw it in a bag, take it back and see if there's anything in it. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I guess we'll see you on the next video. Okay, we're about 3/4 of a mile away from that other mine, the underground one. And I was driving on that road that you can see right over there. I just happened to glance over here and seen a waste rock pile. Now, mind you, I've been driving past this spot since I was a little kid. So I've probably been past this 100 times and never seen it. So looks like there might have been a little adit right here at one time. In the waste rock pile here, I don't think it went in real far. Yeah, it might have went in 100 or so feet at some point. I think it's all collapsed, is from what it looks like. Brecciated. I'm going to take that and crush that. Lots of copper staining. So I think one time there was an adit going in right there. Kind of hard to tell if this was actual adit or just a trench they dug. Pretty sure that wasn't added. More copper standing down on that rock. Looks like there might be another waste rock pile over here. Don't think this was a added more than a dozer or something come in here and took a chunk out. Grab some samples and off to the next spot. Okay, I spent a little more time wandering around, and I think I found a high-grade pile they had set off to the side, and I just picked up some of the rock that was there. I'm going to take this stuff back and crush it, see what we get. Oh. These beater bars are really taking some hits from rocks like those. I really need a jaw crusher, but I've yet to find one at a decent price. I found several around, and I'm okay with an old one. But people overvalue their product sometimes. I found some that, they're built in probably the early 1900s to 1930 area, and these guys are wanting $6,000, $7,000 for these things. I'm poor, so we don't have a jaw crusher.